And we're learning Friday, the 5th of Sivan. That's how we're doing this. Okay, this is going on for several years. We went through each of the days of preparation for the giving of the Torah. We did Monday, the 1st of Sivan, Tuesday, the 2nd of Sivan, Thursday, the 4th, Wednesday, the 3rd of Sivan, Thursday, the 4th of Sivan, and now we're doing Friday, the 5th of Sivan. I got 4 or 5 sichas to learn. Okay, that's how much material there is on Erev Matan Torah, the day before the Eibishter gave us the Torah. So we always start with the Chumash. So I gave you each a handout. Were there any extras, by the way, or are they all gobbled up? I guess that means they're all eaten up.
Can we leave them with you, though, at the end of the class?
You can do whatever you want. I had a man who used to say, just don't call me late for breakfast. You can do whatever you want. Just don't late for breakfast. I'm not sure what that means, but that's supposed to be funny.
Even if you want to call me late for breakfast, we already want breakfast.
So I started to explain to you last week, but you were talking about it more. This was the formal conversion of the Jewish people. I actually copied the Rambam. I'm going to give it to you later. I copied the Rambam, where the Rambam makes it very clear of what the process of Gerus is, what the process of conversion is, and that we learn it from right here. So we're going to do that momentarily, soon. But in the meantime, we're in the middle of a Chumash. So we're on, I don't know how to describe it. I guess it's the 3rd page of your stack. No, the bottom of the 2nd page. We'll start there. The bottom of the 2nd page of your stack, okay? That's where we're going to start. Now, we started reading this last week, and the material that we read last week, we're going to go through quickly. I must have a Chumash with Rashi. Is there a Chumash with Rashi here? That's too much to ask.
It's up there. You left it by Abba Bahar. Second one?
Perfect, thank you. So read it from the beginning, okay? Understand. The Jewish people opt for a personal meeting with God, a direct meeting with God, right? And of course it's going to cost them dearly. But part of what's going to cost them is have to do additional preparations. So we read the bold, right? That's continued Thursday from Pashas Mishpatim in bold. Ve'al Omar, on that Thursday afternoon, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Alei Hashem will come up to God Almighty. Ata, you, Va'aden, and your brother Aden, Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's 2 older sons, Nadav and Avihu, V'shivim Eziknei Yisrael, and the 70 elders of the Jewish people. V'ishtachav Yisem Achei, and you'll bow down from a distance. And the pasuk says, "V'nigash Moshe lavadei." Moshe Rabbeinu approached by himself, al Hashem to the Eibishter. V'heim, and the others, they came closer than the rest of the Jews because they were singled out, but they did not come as close as Moshe Rabbeinu. They remained a little bit further away. V'ham, while the people le'yala imay, they didn't go up at all. That's what it says in the Chumash. Now, the question becomes, these 2 psukim describe Hashem talking to Moshe Rabbeinu on Thursday, right? What happened on Thursday? You must remember a cardinal rule, at least according to Rashi. I don't know if all the commentators agree with this, but this is Rashi's opinion. That Moshe Rabbeinu only went up on the mountain to talk to God early in the morning. And I suspect that was his tradition even when the Beis Hamikdash was built and the Shechina was in the Beis Hamikdash. Moshe went in the morning. He had his conversations with God first thing in the morning. If he had a conversation with the Eibishter Kvayochel, and he went out, and he had a reason to go back in, he would wait till the next day. He wouldn't go in twice. And he only went early in the morning. So that Thursday morning, Moshe went in to the Eibishter, went up the mountain, and he told the Eibishter that the Yidden are insisting to speak to the Eibishter directly, no lawyers. And as I told you last week, I love to say this, God thought it was a terrible idea. Moses thought it was a great idea. The Jews had no idea what they were getting themselves into. They would all become prophets and they would expire 10 times. They would die 10 times. And the Malachim would bring them back until the Jews said, you know what? Let's go back to plan A. So Moshe tells the Eibishter what the Jews want. And in quotes, Hashem tried to reason with Moshe Rabbeinu, but Moshe thought it was such a cool idea that he didn't want it to be prophets, that he was such blind to the reality. I'm sure it's more complicated than that. I think Moshe Rabbeinu felt it's worth to become a Navi even if you lose your life. Right? Nadav and Avihu lost their lives because they became close to God. After Nadav and Avihu died, there was a law passed that you're not allowed to do that anymore. But this is before. So they'll die. They'll experience oneness with Hashem if this is what they want. That's the most incredible experience, to experience intimacy, conscious intimacy with God, or with godliness, as we like to call it. And Moshe thought it was a great idea. So on that day, when Moshe Rabbeinu tells us today, the most important thing Hashem tells them is what's called mitzvahs priyah. They have to prepare themselves. If they're going to be, quote unquote, inside the fence, and they're going to be privy to the meeting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Hashem is going to give us the Torah, they have to make themselves holy. They have 48 hours to accomplish what should normally take a lifetime, to prepare themselves to become prophets. I'm going to be honest, this morning, I do this each week. When I prepare the class for the week, I listen to bits and pieces of what I said last week, so I know what we discussed. And I talked to you a little bit about how much preparation, how perfect, how precise a person needs to be in his or her entire life, to be worthy that the expression of the Gemara is that the Shekhinah should rest upon him or her. In other words, they should become a prophet. And Yidden, who were very far from perfect, had 48 hours to achieve it. So Hashem gives Moshe Rabbeinu instructions about how they should prepare themselves. And then we come to this. What does it say here? Moshe. And again, we're inferring, we're understanding it. Fine. The Jews want to meet me directly. And I'll if that's what they want, they can have it. They want to become prophets. They want to meet me without a lawyer. Gesund and hate will do it their way. It would not be so gesund in the end, but fine. If this is what they want, we'll do it their way. But even under the new terms, where they're going to become prophets, there's also going to be levels. And that's how you read these two psukim. Hashem says to Moshe, all the Jews are inside the fence. They're all going to experience prophecy, but they're not going to all experience prophecy from the same place. You're going to come up the mountain. Aaron is going to be at the foot of the mountain. Nadav and Avihu are going to be lower than him. The elders are going to be lower than them. And then it's going to be the Jewish people. Meaning, even within the new plan for Matan Torah, that Hashem is going to give himself to every single Jew directly and personally without a sarsa, without a lawyer, there's still going to be differences. Some Yidden are going to be in a higher level, and some Yidden are going to be a lower level. So when you read Pasuk Beis, see what Pasuk Beis says? V'nigash Moshe levadei, Moshe Rabbeinu will approach by himself. El Hashem to God, v'heim le'yagoshu, they're not going to approach. You reading? V'ha'am, and the people, lo yalu im, are not going to stand with him. This is written in present tense. This pasuk can be read as a narrative, as a story, or as an instruction. In other words, it can either be read as something which already happened, or as something which is meant to happen. You have to understand in Pshutei Shel Mikra that this pasuk is part of Hashem's instructions. Hashem says to Moshe, they want to become prophets? Fine. Go down, prepare them for Matan Torah. For 2 days they have to be in a state of perishus, of separation and holiness. And after that, still tell them that there's going to be madregas, it's still levels. You're going to go to the top of the mountain, Aaron's going to be at the foot of the mountain, Nadav and Avihu are going to be a little bit further away, and the elders are going to be even further away, and so on. And that's how you read these two psukim. That Hashem says to Moshe, tell the Yidden that even if they're going to be prophets, there's levels in prophecy. Now, I don't want to give you a long drasha on prophecy, but when the Rambam talks about prophecy, the Rambam explains that prophecy has levels. And he actually compares levels of prophecy. Thank you, Tachta. Thank you very much. He compares levels of prophecy to levels of learning. You have different levels of learning. Some people understand more, some people understand less, some people understand more deeply, some people understand more basically. Some people learn one subject, other people learn another subject. Now, prophecy is a communication between man and God, or God and man. But prophecy is the communication between God and man, which is all about man. We talked about this at length last year when we learned Thursday. It's all about man's worthiness. In other words, if a person's on a higher level, they'll experience prophecy in a higher way. If a person's on a lower level, they're going to experience prophecy in a lower way. I explained to you that the Chazal say, the Gemara says, that the era of prophecy, at the time when there were many prophets, which is exactly 1,000 years according to my count, for the Hashem gave us the Torah until Shimon HaTzadik passes away 40 years into the second Beis Hamikdash. It's exactly, it's precisely 1,000 years from 2448 to 3448. And during that period, the Gemara says there were 1.2 million prophets. 1.2 million prophets in 1,000 years. That means 12,000 new men and women became prophets each year during that millennium.
During when? Sorry?
The 1,000 years from Matan Teda till Shimon HaTzadik passes away, which is 40 years into the second Beis Hamikdash, which is exactly 1,000 years, there were 1.2 million prophets. Keflaim Achei Temimim, the Gemara says. Now, we have a record of only 55 out of 1,200,000. 48 men and 7 women. And the reason is because the Gemara says we only record prophecy which are for later generations, and the rest of the prophecies, they experienced prophecy in a way that was local. Either it was only for them, or only for their times, and the rest, and so on. So understand that when you read about Yeshaya, Isaiah, who ran around talking to the people, he was like the greatest of the prophets. And Ezekiel, Yecheskel, or Eliyahu, and Elisha. Most prophets achieved this level of intimacy with Hashem, but it was for them. It wasn't on a high enough level where they could share with anybody else, or they were meant to share with anybody else. It was prophecy, it was an intimate meeting with Hashem, but it was on a whole level. And this is what it's saying in this pasuk. Hashem says to Moshe, even if they're all going to be prophets, but they're not all the same. Aaron is closer, Nadav is further away, the 70 others are further away, and the rest of the camp is even further away. You understand? That's what this pasuk or psukim are saying. Now the personality that's missing here is a guy named Yeshua, Joshua, who was destined to be the Beis Rabbeinu's successor. And he was now he followed his teacher around like a shadow, like a second skin. And he stayed at the foot of the mountain the entire 40 days. He didn't just stay there for the occasion. Now, what level was he on? We don't know. Doesn't say. But it's interesting that he's not included in this grouping. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm saying it now for the third time, even if all the Jews become prophets, some are going to be closer, some are going to be further. Are we good?
Yeah.
So then the next pasuk continues. Vayavi Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu comes. Vayisaper la'am es kol divrei Hashem. He tells the people all the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ve'es kol ha'mishpatim, and all of the laws. Vayan kol ha'am koilech. The entire collective, the entire congregation answered in one voice. Vayeminu, and they said, kol ha'dvarim asher diber Hashem, all the words, all the things that Hashem has spoken, nasa we will do. Now, girls, I want to point something out. On the same page that you're holding, I'm holding here. Don't be afraid of me. I'm not worth it. My wife, after 35 years, don't be afraid of me. If something asks...
Which one are you?
I just read Pasuk Gimel, but I want to point something out. If you look at the top of the page, there's one kind of type. The bottom of the page is a different kind of type. The top of the page is from yesterday. The dark, the bold type is from Mishpatim. And as I explained to you last week, the story of the giving of the Torah is broken up into 2 parashas, which is one of the things we're going to be talking about in the first Sikha we're going to learn. Look here, Pasuk Gedalit. See Pasuk Gedalit, top of the page? Vayered Moshe minahar. Moshe came down the mountain, Elam to the people. Vayekadesh etzam. He made them holy. Vayechapsu simleisam. They washed their clothes. Vayemed Elam. He told the people, come and wait for the third day, that 48 hours. I'll teach you Elisha. Stay away. Don't be intimate physically. You have to be pure. You go to the mikveh and don't be intimate physically. That says here. Now look, when it says in the middle of the page, Gimel, here. You need a copy? I have copies for you.
No, I can't find it, I'm sorry.
Open up the page. It's on the back of the first page.
I did it.
Come.
Thank you.
I have on it. It says it's under the heading "Continued Thursday from Precious Mishpatim" in bold, and then we're in section B.
Okay.
Like it's the back of the first page.
I see.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want you to understand that when it's we're good. We're all in tune. Yeah. When it says here, "Vayered Moshe minahar," Moshe came down the mountain in Yedalit, and it says in the middle, "Gimel Vayavi Moshe." It's the same story, written in 2 different places. In Pashas Yisrei, it says that Moshe tells Hashem that the Jews want to speak to the Eibishter directly, and Hashem says, fine, they can speak to me directly, prepare them. In Pashas Mishpatim, you have details that are added, where Hashem says to Moshe in the middle of the page, they're going to become prophets, but they're not going to all be equal. Even in prophecy, they're not going to be equal. Aaron is going to be physically closer because he's going to be spiritually higher. Nadav and Avi is going to be physically a little bit farther away because he's going to be spiritually a little bit lower. The 70 elders are going to be physically a little further away because they're going to be spiritually even lower. And the rest of them are going to stay in the camp. I can reach them. I can get them. I'll get them. But they're not going to go up at all. So this story and this story is the same story. So when it says in Pasuk Yudal Vayedid Moshe min Ahor, the top of the page, and it says in the middle of the page Gimel Vayavay Moshe Vayisapeh, it's actually the same story. Moshe comes down the mountain and he has several things to do. Number one, get the ready for Har Sinai. That's in Pashas Yisrei. Number two, to get ready to convert the Jewish people. That's in Pashas Mishpatim. So you're actually reading the same event twice. Once in Pashas Yisrei, and in Pashas Yisrei, Moshe, the Torah offered us certain details of what happened. He came down the mountain and he spoke to the Jewish people about getting ready to become a prophet. Want to be a prophet? Don't waste any time and don't waste anything, and be pure and holy and think about lofty things and become a refined person. What takes a lifetime, they had 48 hours to do. That's here. Here, it's the same story, but the Torah talks about different aspects. First of all, that even if they become prophets, they're not going to all be equal prophets. And second of all, he teaches them certain mitzvahs. Okay? So let's read Gimel again. Did you follow that? That wasn't too complicated, right? Gimel again. Vayovei Moshe Rabbeinu comes. Vayisaper la'om es kol divrei Hashem. He tells the people all of Hashem's words, namely that they have to get themselves ready to become prophets. But he tells them also something else. V'eskol ha'mishpatim. V'eskol ha'mishpatim means all of the laws. And if you look, I have an Rashi in front of me. That means, I talked about this last week in some detail, Sheva mitzvahs of Noach, Shabbos, Kibbud Avim, Paraduma, and Dinah. It was the day before the Torah would be given. It's actually 2 days before. It's Thursday. And Moshe says, we're going to get the Torah in 2 days hence. You have to spiritually prepare yourself. But you also have to review what you have already. Right? You're going to get the Torah on Shabbos, the 6th of Sivan, pardon me, and you get all 613 mitzvahs. So the spiritual preparation, which is in Pashas Yisrei, is get yourself ready to become a prophet. The scholarly preparation, the practical preparation is, let's review all the Torah we have from before. I told you last week that the Rambam, when the Rambam discusses the Sheva mitzvahs of Noach, the way he presents it was that when Hashem created the world, Adam Rishon was given 6 mitzvahs. Adam was given only 6 mitzvahs. He wasn't given the 7th. Why was he only given 6 mitzvahs?
Didn't have a mother or father?
No. The 6 mitzvahs do not include Kibbud Avim. Because you were not allowed to kill animals and eat meat. So if you're not allowed to kill animals and eat meat, there was no mitzvah of Evim and Achai, of being cruel to animals. It was self-understood. So they got 6 commandments, which were do not curse God, do not steal, make a court system, don't murder, don't worship idols, don't be immoral sexually. But the mitzvah of not being cruel to animals was not originally given because they were not allowed to even kill, not allowed to eat meat, so they couldn't have right to touch animals. Noach came out of the Teva in whatever year it was, 1056. He was born in 1056, so it was 1656, came out of the Teva, 1057. However we count it. And Hashem said, I'm allowing you to eat meat. Until now, you're only allowed to eat vegetation, fruit and seeds and grasses. I'm allowing you to eat meat. And it says in some of the Sfarim that the reason Hashem allowed people to eat meat after the Teva, because Noach was a tzaddik. He did not do the sins that brought about the flood. But the animals were all guilty. All the animals had sinned. The way the animals sinned is misdavgon she'eino mina. They were having relationships with animals of a different type, which is a commandment that animals are not supposed to do. Today it's very unnatural, it's very unlikely, but before the Mabel there was misdavgon she'eino mina. So they were all meant to die. He saved them only to help people live. And since the Eibusha should save the animals to help people live, Hashem says, in quotes, animals do not serve me directly anymore, now they serve you, so he permitted them to eat meat. So then Hashem said, you're allowed to kill and eat, but you're not allowed to torture. And he added the 7th mitzvah of Evim and Achai. You with me?
Yes.
Yeah? Then Avraham Avinu came along, and Hashem gave him another mitzvah, Bris Milah and Shila Shachris. Then Yitzchak came along, and Hashem gave him the mitzvah of Maisis, of giving a tithe, of giving a certain amount of tzedakah, and he made Tfilas Mincha. Then Yaakov came along, and Hashem gave him the mitzvah of Gid and Nosha, that you're not allowed to eat the sciatic nerve of an animal's, whatever his front leg, whatever leg it is. And he was Mispal Tfilas Arvis, right? So how many mitzvahs we got now? We got 10 or 11. We have Milah, we have Maisis, and we have Gid and Nosha, and maybe also Karbanis. Maybe also Tefillah, maybe davening, right? If you want to count that, right? Then they got more mitzvahs. Particularly after they left Egypt, Hashem gave them some big ones. He gave them Shabbos, Kibbutz Avim, keeping the Shabbos, honoring your parents. Paradum of all things, that you have to prepare the ash of the red heifer to purify people who become spiritually impure by contacting the remains of a person, a dead person. And the details about the law, the court of law, even though it's one of the Sheva mitzvahs, Hashem repeats it as a separate union. It could be that it's a higher standard or more detail, I don't know what it is. So the Torah, as the Rambam describes it, is given piecemeal. In shtikalach, pieces, one piece, another piece, another piece. And then the Rambam says, Bo Moshe Rabbeinu came along, and the Torah was completed through him. Nigma the Torah al Yad. Meaning, it's not like the way we understand it in mysticism, that what Moshe Rabbeinu got was a whole nother thing than what they had before. No. They were given mitzvahs slowly. Adam was given 6. Noach was given a 7th. Avraham was given an 8th. Yitzchak was given a 10th. Yaakov was given a 9th. Yaakov was given a 10th. And then you can count also an 11th. And then they had more mitzvahs. By the time they got the Torah, they had many more than 7 mitzvahs. They had a handful of mitzvahs. And it was all setting up when the Eibush to give us the Torah. And the Torah is going to become complete. We're going to have all 630 mitzvahs. So Moshe said last week, and yesterday, make yourself holy to become a prophet. And he says this week, let's review the Torah we have already in preparation for getting more Torah. So if you think about it logically, and that may be a bad idea, but nevertheless, if you think about it logically, last week's part of the account of Thursday, the 5th of Sivan, or the 4th of Sivan, pardon me, are about prophecy, about the spiritual aspects. And our Pasha, Mishpatim, speaks about the same day, but he speaks about the legal aspects, the practical aspects. And we read on. So the Moshe came along, the middle of the second page. He told the Jewish people, it's called Divrei Hashem, all the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and all the mitzvahs they had until that point. The Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Ner, and Shabbos, and Kibbutz Avim, and Paradum and Dinim. Vayan kol ha'am kelecha, the whole nation sat together. Vayemu, they said, kol ha'dvarim b'shdiv Hashem, whatever Hashem has spoken, both at the mountain, and also both to the office, and also when he gave the mitzvahs in Mora and so on. Nasa, we're going to do it. The Jews say, okay, we're in. Now, I don't know if they're expecting 613, it's quite a few mitzvahs, but they had more than 7. They had a handful of mitzvahs, important ones and hard ones and difficult ones. And Hashem says, okay, you're going to be getting more. I'm about to complete the Torah. He said, whatever you're going to give us, we're going to take. We're good? Yeah?
I have a question. Rabbi Paltiel?
Yes.
Could I ask you a question?
Your own risk.
Two. Okay. Second is, last lesson you said, last class, that Hashem thought that it's a horrible idea to reveal himself to the Jews. But now we're saying that Hashem revealed himself, so it was just for specific amount of people which were like...
No, everybody. It was leveled everybody. And it turned out to be a terrible idea because they died 10 times. Hashem knew what he was talking about. And you know what else? Moshe knew that Hashem knew what he was talking about. But he didn't care. A Yid becomes a Navi. What could be better than that? Moshe was a Chassidish Yid. In addition to being a Rebbe, he was a Chassidish Yid. I told you the story once before that there's a man that I knew who used to do business deals. And whenever he finished the deal, he'd bring the Rebbe a shopping bag of cash for tzedakah, that the Rebbe could do whatever he wants. So he told me he once got involved in a deal, and the deal was terrible. He found it terrible terms. So he gave the money in advance, before the deal. So Rabbi Klein, Olav Hashem, the Rebbe's secretary, said to him, you already just brought in money for your last deal. What's this? He says, tell the Rebbe. If the Rebbe asks, we're taking out insurance. we're giving the tzedakah before. So Rabbi Klein walks into there with this, it was a shopping bag full of cash. It was thousands of dollars. And he says, this is for Battle and Label. They were two brothers. They were real estate developers, and they were chassidim, and they gave the Rebbe a lot of money. So the Rebbe says to Rabbi Klein, and they just brought in money for the last job. How did it happen so quick? So Rabbi Klein said that they told me to say that this job is very misubach, very complicated. So they took out insurance, and the Rebbe cracked up, and laughed. He says, Agavalde Kamsa, what a great idea. So on the one hand, the Rebbe is the Rebbe who has the power to give brachas. On the other hand, he's the chassid who appreciates the feeling of a chassid that you got to take out insurance. You see, so Moshe Rabbeinu, and he told me, label, they never had an easier job in their life. He says the liens against that property, it was unbelievable. Everybody owned it. You know, the federal, state, city, there were taxes for years and years and years. It was a property that was so burdened with tax that it was no way to develop it in profit. In other words, it had to bankrupt itself. It was like a circle. And 3 different firms of developers had taken it and bankrupted it 3 times over because of the liens. And they figured it out. They never gave them a bracha. They figured it out. It was the easiest job they ever had. So on the one hand, the Rebbe is giving them the bracha. On the other hand, the Rebbe says it. As a chassid, it's a great idea. Moshe Rabbeinu, as a Rebbe, knew that the Eibishter was right. But as a chassid, he thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So they'll die. It's the cost of doing business. I know it sounds so insensitive, but Moshe Rabbeinu knew what it means to meet Hashem personally because he did it all the time, and he thought it would be wonderful for every year to have that experience, no matter what the cost. What's interesting is how the story is told. The spiritual part of the story is in Yisrei. The practical part of the same story, it's happening at the same time. Moshe is coming down the mountain on the top of your page in Yudalid, and Moshe coming down the mountain in the middle of your page in Gimel is exactly the same event. But the part of it which has to do with the spirituality, getting ready to become a prophet, is in Yisrei. And the part of it which has to do with the practical side, means learning and remembering the Torah and knowing how to keep its mitzvahs, this is a mishpat. And then it says...
Wait, sorry. So which one? So Yudalid is the one where they have to learn about the different mitzvahs?
No. Learn how to become prophets. Gimel is the one where they're learning what all the Torah they had until that point is reviewed. Okay?
But is it, let me ask you one.
Of course.
Is it, following question, is it valuable for Hashem to choose to die after seeing him or to live in this world? Like, I think that it's opposite idea of what Hashem created this world for. Like, for sure, for Jew, it's a bad thing to meet Hashem and to die after, like, to have the prophecy with Hashem. But it's not the reason Hashem created this world for. In my humble opinion.
What is your question?
What's the biggest value? Like, which value is big?
Depends who you ask. Hashem has one value, Moshe has another value, and the Yidden have a third value.
Hashem's perspective.
Hashem thought it was a bad idea, told Moshe, don't do it. No! But Moshe said, please, with a cherry on top, you understand? I don't know, I say it in Russian, but Hashem said, okay, now's that on you. You want it, you got it. I told you, Hashem said it was a terrible idea, Moshe said it was a great idea, and the Jews had no idea what was going to happen.
Right. You said it.
But Moshe got his way. Why? Because in addition to being a Rebbe, he was pushed to Chassidish Yid. He said, it's worth it. It's worth it. So you're asking practical questions. Moshe didn't think practically. He thought like a chassid. That's the whole point. That's what's beautiful about this.
So should we want to think like a chassid or think practically or both?
I see, if I answer you, I'm going to have to answer her, and her, and her, and her, and her, and her, and her. There's a guy named Nadav and Avihu, actually 2 guys. You ever heard of Nadav and Avihu? You know what happened to them? They did the same trick and they died, and Hashem did not resurrect them. Mm-hmm. And Hashem said, no more, that's it. This business of getting so close to me that you die is over. This is before then. Okay? Now, that's the tip of the iceberg of the answer to your question. But in religion, there's always the question, is God serving me or am I serving God? Is it benefiting me or is it benefiting him? And this is a question you and I ask ourselves every single day. And the ideal is, like she said, that we serve God. But there's no doubt that part of our relationship with the Eibishter is that our relationship with Him is very meaningful. It serves us. That's what Moshe was thinking. That's what Nadav and Avihu were thinking. And Hashem said, yeah, it's allowed to serve you, but you got to stay alive. Then you can serve me also. But this is before them. Okay? So we continue. Vayichtav Moshe kol divrei Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote all this down. So Rashi says, what did he write down? He wrote down whatever they just learned. He wrote down from Bereshis until now, until Mishpat. Now, I got up this morning and I listened to part of the recording from last week, and I discussed with you briefly the opinions in the Gemara. There's two opinions in the Gemara about how the Sefer Torah was written. Okay? One opinion of the Gemara is that Megillas Nitna, the Torah was written in little pieces, what we call in halachic language pashiyos, sections. Have any of you ever seen the inside of a Sefer Torah or a picture of it? Anybody?
Yeah.
If you look at a Sefer Torah, you see that there's spaces. And the spaces are different. Sometimes it's the middle of the line, sometimes it's the end of a line, sometimes it's the end of a line and the beginning of the next line, all kinds of different arrangements. Those spaces are called parshas. All the psukim with the one space and the next are called the parsha. Okay? And sometimes they have what's called a psucha, an open space, and sometimes they have a stum, which is called a closed space. There's a lot of complicated shittas about this, but we follow one sheet and the other shittas. The bottom line is the Torah is a bunch of little pieces. And according to one opinion of the Gemara, that's how it was written. According to the other opinion of the Gemara, Torah Chasum and Nitna, the Torah was given to the Jews on one day, entirely from beginning to end, without any division. So Chassidus asks the classic question: how can you argue about a fact? Right? If we believe that Elu ve'elu Divrei Elokim Echad, that they're both right, when you're talking about factual things, if one is right, the other is wrong. When the second one is wrong, the other one is right. How can they both be right? And Chassidus answers that they're both true. Practically, the Torah was written in pieces. And then it was put together at whatever time it was. Spiritually, when the Torah was put together and given to us, it was given to us as a single unit. As if it wasn't put together. And this is a higher level. Here we're reading about part of Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu sat down on Thursday, the 4th of Sivan, and he wrote down the Chumash from Bereshis until this point. So let's keep reading, okay? Right here. Moshe ben wrote the Kol Divrei all Hashem. This was all on Thursday, the 4th of Sivan. He came back down, he gave them messages about prophecy, he reviewed with them all the Torah that until the point, and he wrote it down. Now, Friday, 5th day, 5 Sivan 2448, the collective conversion of the Jewish people. I'm reading it. It's the middle of a pasuk, realize, right? Dalet falls from here into here. They got up in the morning. Now you have to remember, when you tell a person, you're 48 days to become a prophet, 48 hours to become a prophet, I quit. They didn't quit, but they worked. And again, I listened this morning to the class I gave you last week, and I talked about what it means using every minute, not wasting anything. Now, the truth of the matter is that we should be that way always. But we're not. That's why we're not prophets. Prophets are that way always. Moshe, at least for the next 2 days, be good, That was the message. So that night, whatever they did regarding sleeping and eating was very, very controlled. But be that as it may, they get up in the morning. Now it's Friday, the 5th of Sivan. Moshe builds a mizbeach, an altar underneath the mountain, and 12 single stone monuments, l'shneim also shifti Yisrael, to the 12 tribes of Israel. Now it says in Gemara, it's brought in Sforim, the time of the Ovis, people used to make matzevis. Matzev means the equivalent of matzev. It translates English as a monument, one stone that you stand up as a reminder of something, and people use them as a mizbeach. Right. The best example of a matzeva was Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, remember that story? The 12 stones, and they were arguing who's going to lay on which one Yaakov was going to lay his head. So all the stones became one. Yaakov got up in the morning and he took one stone, as opposed to the night before there were many stones, and he poured oil on the stone. And he said, "This is Beis Rivka," and he promised to come back. And of course, 22 years later, he returned. So the Gemara says, I think Rashi brings it in Chumash, that in the time of the Ovis, making a monument was considered honorable. When the Torah was given, the Eibusha says, you're not allowed to make a matzeva. You're not allowed to make a single stone monument because Hashem hates it. Now, you're not allowed to worship idols. We all understand that, right? You're not allowed to make an altar for idols. We understand that also. You're not allowed to make a matzeva even for Hashem. A mizbeach of many stones, we're not only allowed to make, we have to make in the Beis Hamikdash. But a single stoned matzeva used to be honorable and actually desirable and respectable in the time of the Ovis, and the Eibusha said no more. But this is before. So Moshe builds a mizbeach, an altar, which is going to bring karbanos, and he puts up 12 monuments. It's hard to know whether Moshe did this himself or the 12 tribes did it, but the bottom line is that's what happened. The day before the Torah was given, each shavit arranged or put up a separate monument. And Moshe Rabbeinu built a mizbeach. And in the presence of those 12 monuments, certain karbanos were going to be offered up, which is going to prepare us to receive the Torah from the Eibusha. You with me? We're good? Yeah.
Amos and Torah, they all make a different monument to him. What was
For themselves. Each of the 12 tribes made a monument to themselves. To themselves. Vayishlech is not a Bnei Yisrael. It makes a sense to call the firstborn of the Jews. Not Bnei Yisrael means the firstborn. Because until the story of the golden calf, the firstborn were meant to be the Kohanim. Okay? And he told them that they should bring the karbanos. Now remember, as I explained to you last week, the Jewish people is going to be now collectively converted. Part of the process of conversion is bringing karbanos. So Moshe Rabbeinu tells them how to get ready to be Nevi'im. Moshe Rabbeinu reviews all the Torah they had until that point. Moshe Rabbeinu writes down all the Torah they had at this point. It's all preparations, and now he's going to convert them. And the first thing he does, he builds a mizbeach and 12 monuments. They offered up offerings. They brought up offerings that were consumed by the mizbeach completely. They also brought peace offerings. Hashem to God Almighty Purim of cows or oxen. Now, if you haven't noticed, I'm literally falling asleep as I'm talking to you, which is really, really bad. We're going to have to break. I have to get some poison into my system to wake myself up. But I just want to point out that it's the day before the Torah is being given to the Jewish people, and they call the then priests. They bring karbanos, and their karbanos consist of two types: offerings that are consumed entirely by the mizbeach, which are called oila, and offerings which are shared by God, the priests, and the population, bringing them, that are called peace offerings. Now you need to understand something. According to halacha, a peace offering is a lower level of holiness than an offering which is entirely consumed by the mizbeach. It's called kachei kodeshim and kachim kalim. Oila, an offering which is consumed entirely by the mizbeach, is called the holy of holies, in terms of karbanos, in terms of sacrifices. A shlamim, a peace offering which is shared between the God and the kohanim and the people, is called kachim kalim, a lower level of holiness. But you need to understand the other side of that coin. That a peace offering is a unique gift that God gave the Jewish people. Understand that according to Jewish law, there is a phenomenon of sacrifice. And it goes back to whom? Where did sacrifices begin? Adam Arishan, Adam. Adam brought karbanis. Cain and Hevel brought karbonis. Remember that story, right? It didn't work out so good for Hevel, but they brought karbonis. Right? Shes brought karbonis, Enish brought karbonis, Noach brought karbonis, Shem brought karbonis, right? And they all went to Harabinit to bring their karbonis. Karbonis have run since the beginning. And you may or may not know this, but the Rambam says that karbonis are an answer to idol worship. And the Ramban takes him to task. He takes off his gloves and beats him up. Because if sacrifice is an answer to idol worship, why did Adam Rishon bring karbonos? There was no idol worship in the world yet. So, without getting into the question of how to resolve the Rambam, there's a website I heard about called Inside Chassidus.org. If you go to that website and you go to Parshas Vayikra, there's a class that answers that question, as far as I remember. I know the guy who runs that website. I know him a little bit. But in any case, karbonos are part of the Jewish religion, not just for Jewish people, but for non-Jews. And it's fascinating. The halachas are fascinating. Why? Because a Jew was told that you could bring a carbon any place you want. If it's certain kinds of karbanos. Other kind of karbanos you can only bring what's called a bama gedela, in where the Mishkan Shile was in a very special place. But certain karbanos you can bring any place you wish, and certain karbanos you bring to the Beis Hamikdash. But that idea that a Jew could bring many karbanos any place he wants was only true until they found the Machon HaMikdash. Till they found the place where the temple would be built. When they came to the place that was destined for the Beis Hamikdash to be built, then Hashem said, from now on, Jews can only bring karbanos here and no place else. You with me?
Yes.
Which means to like this: if you meet a goy, and he's a really pious man, right? He's a practitioner of the 7 laws of Noach, and he says to you, "I want to sacrifice to God. Can you help me?" No, you probably can't help him because you don't know enough, right? But the law would be, you can say to this non-Jew the following: I will teach you, but I can't lift a pebble. Because you could bring a carbon any place you wish, because you're not Jewish. I can only bring it in the Har HaMoreh, only on the Temple Mount. So I can teach you how to do it, but I cannot help you. So you could, on Eastern Parkway, help this guy put up stones and make a mizbeach, however you do that. Has to be attached to the ground. There's not going to be any space underneath it. It's got to be stone. It has to have sand. There's all kinds of rules. It's made of stone. Mizbech Avonim. Mizbech Avonim is chayva. And then you teach him how to slaughter the animal, and you sprinkle the blood, and the carbon has to be consumed by the mizbeach. Those are the rules. To say this in the other words, in the times of the first and second Beis Hamikdash, Goyim brought karbanos, and they were received with open arms. A non-Jew can bring a carbon, no problem. But one thing a non-Jew cannot do: he can't bring a carbon with him and God, sit at the same table and share food. That gift was given only to the Jewish people. In other words, shlamim, a peace offering, it's a lower level of holiness, but it's a very special thing. Because philosophically, a carbon oila means you bring a carbon and the Eibushter eats and you watch him. Shlamim means you're sitting at the same table. Hashem is sitting here, the Kohanim are sitting here, and you are sitting with your wife and your children and your slaves and maidservants, and at the same time they're sharing his meat. This gift is unique to the Jewish people. Only Yidden were given the right to not only sacrifice to God, but to break bread with him. Shlamim. Now, I was not around in the time of the others. I wasn't there. Actually, I was there, I don't remember. I don't remember what's happening in this lifetime. I certainly remember what's happening. You know that there were people alive. There was a famous Hasidic Rebbe whose name was Rabbi Yeshua Heschel of Apt. He was a tzaddik gomer, he was a perfect Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe said great things about him, even though he was a very big critic of the Alter Rebbe's. The Apter Rav on his back had a red birthmark, the shape of a diagonal line. He had a birthmark on his back that was shaped like this. You read it. So he said he remembers being a sheep in Yaakov's herds, and that he was the tithe. He was Maisa. And the way you do Maisa is you let all the animals go into a kennel, and you let them go out one at a time, and you hold a whip with red dye, and when the 10th one passes, you mark it. And he said that physical birthmark was the blood, that the red dye that Yaakov Avinu put on his back when he was an animal in a different lifetime. Now, just in case you need help, an animal in Yankov Avinu's herds in the times of the Alter Rebbe was a Rebbe. So what kind of animals do you think Yankov Avinu was shepherding? Think about it. It's mind-blowing. It doesn't make any sense. But this is what he said. And he maybe he shouldn't have revealed it, but he wasn't lying. He knew what he was talking about. He was a very holy man. He used to daven for the Yom Kippur. He was the leader of services. And he would describe what the Kohen Gadol would do. But he didn't say the Kohen Gadol did, the Kohen Gadol did. He said, this is what I did, this is what I did, this is what I did. Because he also remembered being in a different Gilgal of Kohen Gadol. And he would say, Kachayishi Maina, I would count and I would go in. He told the story in first person. And this was a Yid who wasn't Shaykhs to Guzma. The story sounds fantastic. But he would push it. He remembered his earlier Gilgulim, and he would tell his Chassidim, this is what happened to me in this Gilgul. And Yankov Avinu was heard, he was an animal. It was an animal. And at the time to the Alter Rebbe, he was not a human being, he was a perfect tzaddik. Perfect tzaddik. So again, I don't remember that far back. I'm not the Alter Rebbe. But I believe that when people brought karbanas before Matan Torah, before Hashem gave us the Torah, listen, people did whatever they wanted. People made human sacrifice. People made human sacrifice. But if you brought sacrifices based on the traditions that came down to them from Adam and Rishon, who knew these traditions because they learned the Torah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that for all the non-Jews bringing sacrifice to God, the one God, until the Torah was given, no person ever brought a sacrifice and ate any of the meat. You didn't sit with the Abish at the same table and enjoy a feast. That was too rude. You sacrifice to God, that's exactly what it is. Here, Moshe tells the firstborn, he calls them the autumn young people, bring oilos, bring sacrifices which God is going to eat completely. That's normal. But he also says, we're going to bring peace offerings. We're going to sit at the same table. This is the day before the Torah was given. And we're going to eat meat with him. We're going to share food. So the day before the Torah was given, again, I don't know this for sure. I really don't. I didn't research it. But this is how I always understood it. That the day before the Torah was given, Moshe says to the Yidden, we're going to get ready for giving the Torah by bringing a carbon. And the carbon is not only going to be an oila, an animal which is completely consumed by the Mizbeach, we're actually going to enjoy the meat ourselves.
This is the Friday.
This is the Friday. Now, I have the Rambam in my hand that describes conversion. And the Rambam is going to quote this pasuk. But the Rambam says that when a person converts to Judaism and brings a carbon, it's an oila, it's not a shlamim. When you become a Jew, you have to bring two animals or one animal, it's an oila, you give it away. Here, two things are going on. Moshe tells the Na'arim, he tells the firstborn, who were then the Kayanim, bring karbonis oila. And again, let's just say it the way the Rambam says it. This carbon is going to be part of the process of becoming Jewish. But also make a feast. And we're going to sit at the same table and share food with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I would like to believe, you know how useful that is? It's not useful at all. But you happen to be sitting here and you're my captive audience, and I'm a dramatist, right? I like to make things very, very exciting. In my view, this is a first. The day before the Torah was given, Moshe says to Yidden, tomorrow we're going to meet God. Today we're going to sit at the same table with him and break bread with him. Bring shlomim. That's how I understand it. You follow?
But they weren't Jewish, so how were they allowed to?
Oh, they were on the way. They were headed there. Go ahead.
So today, Gerim can't bring.
They owe it. When Mashiach comes, they have to bring it.
Okay, that's my question.
The Gemara says, yeah. And the whole thing that they brought in the Rambam is that chas v'shalom for a person to think that there's something wrong with the Gatus. The Gatus is complete. You owe him the carbon. And Mashiach comes, they state, every Ger Tzedek is going to have to bring a carbon. Now, what if you're the grandson of a Ger Tzedek or the granddaughter of a Ger Tzedek? How does that work? They all owe a carbon, or just the one who did the conversion? Or maybe all the people who are aware that they come from Gedim have to bring a carbon, but once it becomes forgotten that they're a Ged, they become similar to the Jewish people, then they don't have to bring the carbon. So you got three choices. What's the answer? I don't know. We'll find out. Questions or comments?